For those that don't know me, I'm Dennis Kometz from Taylor Bruce, and we're here to talk about SOBIPro and using SOBIPro as a CCK. And SOBIPro is an extension. Taylor Bruce is where I work. Taylor Bruce Design Partnership Chicago. It's a design and development partnership agency, and I'm a developer, and I work with a lot of designers. So I'm, I guess, in a minority there, but it's a great place to work. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through sort of how I came to discover what a CCK is, and then I'm going to go into where I used it, which is our site, taylorbruce.com. So you'll see like a site tour, and then I'm going to go into the code of how I've actually implemented some of the functionality that you'll see. I met Sigrid and Radek at the Joomla World Conference.
Where are they from?
They're wonderful people. They live in Germany.
Okay, the Germans, okay.
But they're Polish.
Oh, okay.
So,
Europeans.
But he's lived north of Frankfurt, I think, for like 30 years or whatever. So they're wonderful people. They are the creators of SOBIPro, husband and wife team. Very talented, very very nice people. Can't say enough about them. So what I'm going to be showing you is a portfolio website, and so this is a portfolio of projects. So this is the Taylor Bruce set of projects, and they're categorized. This is the featured set of projects. So this is, if you go to our home page, what you'll see. These are the thumbnails of the project. So if you click on each one of these, you'll see more stuff. But before we get into that, what I want to show you is how I came to realize that I needed a CCK. I had a set of requirements from the designers, and my manager, my boss, said I want to have a portfolio for our website. So that was the first, to showcase our projects. I said, well, Joomla can do that. He said I wanted the ability to show projects by groups, by categories. So like I want to have a featured set of projects, I want to have a print set of projects, I want digital branding by client. Hey, Joomla can do that. He said I want to have logos of the clients, I want to show thumbnails, and I want to also have slideshows. I said, well, so far you're talking Joomla to me. And then he said, I want the ability to add content to the project based upon a category the project is being viewed from. So I said, well, if the category is the menu item, that can be a module. So that's still Joomla in my mind. Then he said, I want to easily maintain the list of project attributes. So what do you mean by attributes? Well, things like the project name, the project date, the project description, all the images that go with it. I said, well, you could probably, what do you mean by easily maintain? So I started thinking maybe I need a CCK for that. And then he said the big one, I want projects to be able to be in multiple categories. So I want a project that's featured, and it could be a digital project, one of your websites. Or I want a project that's featured, and I want it to be a print. Or maybe it's a website that's a brand project also. So I want to be able to put the same project into multiple categories. And I said CCK for sure for that, or I thought so anyway. And then he said I want to also automatically relate projects by client name. And I heard of the tagging that you could do in Joomla, but when he said automatically, he doesn't want to even tag them. So hopefully a CCK can handle that. And the last thing I didn't realize, and he didn't say it, is I discovered that we need to have dynamic categories, and I'll get into what those are. So for example, when you go to a client name, you want that client's name to be a category, because from that perspective, you want to then show all the projects for that category, like you would show all the digital projects, all the featured projects, all the branding projects. So you want it, from usability perspective, to look like a category, but you don't want to put in, each time you get a new customer, you don't want to put in a new category. So I was hoping that CCK could handle that requirement also. So I went to Wikipedia, the place of all knowledge, and I looked for CCK, and I found, what did I find? I found a Ching Chang Kong Air Force Base. I said, okay, all right. So they probably are looking for me to type in content construction kit. So I typed it in, and doesn't exist. But you know, there are some references to other stuff, one of which was Drupal. Well, I know Drupal, and I wanted to find out more about Drupal. I also saw this SOBI thing, and I did look at that, I peeked at it. It's something for Joomla 1.5, so I wasn't too interested in it. So I went to Drupal. Drupal says CCK allows site administrators to dynamically create content types by extending the database schema. I said, okay. I'm not sure what that means. And then it says a content type describes the kind of information. All right, still don't know what that means. Allows you to add custom fields to custom content types. Oh, okay, now I know what that means. And using the CCK, I can create a content type that has exactly the fields I need. That I understood. So that sounded, you know, like it was going to meet requirement number 5, you know. So I said, so far so good. Well, then I didn't see any other, you know, descriptions for any of this other stuff. So I went to the place of all knowledge for extending Joomla. I went to the extension directory, and under authoring and content, I found content construction kits, and I found that there was 20 of them. So I looked through the 20, and I also noticed that they had a definition. It wasn't really helpful, but it said, you know, it's articles with extra fields or extra layers of categories. Well, I'm wondering, okay, the extra fields I knew, maybe the extra layers of categories could help me out. Does that mean I can have an article in more than one category? So I'll promise for that. So I figured, okay, I'm going to have to look at all of these 20. I should come up and know what I'm looking for. So I came up with my own definition. A generic name given to a Joomla extension. Content types contain custom fields that allow the creation of back-end forms to create things like membership list, product pages, directory listings. So what I'm saying here is that Joomla has one content type. They call it the article. And it has one field. It's like the WYSIWYG field. You put everything in there. And that's its one place. It's the article in one field. But there's this concept of having more fields and more groups of fields to form things called membership lists, product images, directory listings, and not just articles. And then the content to category mapping is a one-to-many relationship. So that's what I felt I needed, along with the ability to easily relate one to the other without any type of tagging. Tagging would be okay, but it would be nice if it was strictly automatic. So with those in mind as my definitions, they met all my requirements. I went forth and I looked at the most popular extensions in the Joomla extension directory. And by most popular, what I looked at was just, you know, how many reviews they had. Not what their rating was, but, you know, how many people actually used them. So 89, 69, 68, 58, so forth. And the ratings are subjective, but I figured, you know, if people felt strongly about something, then I wanted to look at it. So I started my quest, and for some reason, I can't remember why, I didn't evaluate Content Builder. But I evaluated the first 4, and then I sort of stopped because I found SOBIPro, and that met all my requirements. But I couldn't find it, believe it or not, in the Joomla extension directory where all these others are listed. It's listed under directories and documentation. I think it's a content construction kit, just like all the others. I mean, there's really no reason that it should be in this categorization, except that their first application, like I said, you could have recipes and directories. Well, they did directories, so they were known as the directory extension. But it's just because of how they chose to use their technology. Anyway, I found it and I evaluated it. So I built myself a matrix to evaluate, you know, software support and how much it costs. So you can see some of these are free, some of them are free even for the support. Content, they have these fancy names. So in Joomla, you know it as an article. So it would be a content category, section category article, or now it's just a section article. So Joomla calls their sections categories, items and fields, applications for zoo, item types and elements. Flexi content knows theirs as an item and a type in a field. K2 calls them categories and items. Content ordering, how can you order your content manually or by fields, by element only, like Joomla, which means, by field and also by manually or by date or number of hits. Items per category, and this was the important one to me. It's either one-to-one or one-to-many. So Joomla has one-to-one right now. I wish they would do one-to-many. And then they have, these image sizes where if you upload one image, you get a thumbnail and you get an intermediate image for free. Joomla does that too with the extension, the JCK editor. It was important to me at that point in time that it be 3.x compatible, that the architecture was friendly, because I knew that I would have to do probably some sexy stuff with the database. And by that I meant that I could access each of the fields within the database. So if you take all the fields that you created and you put them into a SQL database, and all of them are just like Joomla in that WYSIWYG block in the SQL, you can't really benefit from a query. So I didn't like that. So that was one thing I didn't like about some of the implementations. MVC templating was important to me, user interface, custom fields, third-party extensions. They're all pretty rich in this documentation. Some was not that good, especially because I don't know French. The applications, and these are like the demo applications that they have up and running. And then the data entry, whether this is on the back end, how you enter your data. So I came up with this matrix, and then I started to cross things out. I decided, well, I can't really use Zoo because I wanted it to be database friendly, and all the elements are in one SQL field, and that sort of didn't feel right to me. I wanted to use 3.x, and at that point in time, Flexi content was just available in 2.5. And K2 just has, an article or an item, as they call it, one-to-one in each category, just like Joomla. So that's sort of how I stumbled upon realizing that I needed SOBIPro. So I figured with Joomla doing half of it and SOBIPro doing the other half, that I would be all set to go. And I was, except I used SOBIPro to do everything. I'll cut to the chase. But at this point in time, I really thought that I was going to do half and half, and I wasn't sure, if I needed SOBIPro for 4 or not. So at this point in time, I kept going. So now I want to get a little bit more into the site itself and what these look like as far as when they're implemented. So this is the home page, and this is the featured category of all the projects. So all these projects are in the featured category. And real quick, if I go into the back end of SOBIPro, what you'll see is each item is put into one or more categories. So it's very easy to have multiple categories per selected item. So this is the item. This is 3.0.
Oh, this is 3.0.
No, I'm sorry. It's actually 2.5. But this is SOBIPro, and it's the same interface in both. And then these other, the client name, the project description, the client logo, the thumbnail, and then 6 images for the slide. These are the content items that I created. So rather than having one area for my content construction kit gives you many areas to put your content, and you define these. So I said a content name is text, I said a project name is text, I said project description is WYSIWYG, I said a client logo is an image, and I can set the parameters of, when I upload an image, I get for free 3 images, the original plus 2 downsized ones. I set whatever those are. So, this is pretty easy. I like the fact that it could reside in multiple categories. That was my requirement number 6. I like the fact the attributes were nice and friendly. That was number 5, easily to maintain. So, someone on our staff is going to be putting all this stuff in. They know exactly what goes where, and there's no confusion. And I have access to it as a programmer from the back end individually on an item field by field basis. So that's a quick look at the back end. Let's look at the front end. When you go into the different categories, the featured category, the digital category, the print category, the branding, and the by client. Again, each one of these projects can live in one or many of those categories. Of course, they all live in the by client category. But I want to go through some of the other requirements just to show you how they were implemented. So let's look at this one project. It's called the Ventus. Ventus is the client, and this is the Ventus website for healthcare real estate project. So if you look at this project from the featured view, this is one of those 6 images in the slideshow, and you can go, through the other images in the slideshow, which, we said we'd never have more than 6, so we have 6. We also have now a video. And then if you click on the information button, you see some of those other fields. So like the Ventus name, for example, that's the client name. There's a title for the project, a project name. The WYSIWYG area, which is where you enter all your text. And then this stuff here is one of the requirements for relating all of the projects together. So they were related by just the fact that they're the same name. So if you type in the Ventus name, all of a sudden a new project would pop up here, and that's all you need to do. So that is really, it's automatic without any tagging, without anything.
Is that a field type of SOBIPro?
No. It's done programmatically.
Oh.
So, that's the ease of use that something as powerful as SOBIPro gives you. The other thing I wanted to talk about is this, what we call a call to action. Hey guys, looking for a new creative partner? Give us a call. And so this was supposed to be different, and it is different based upon how I got to this website project. So if I get to this in featured, you get this advertising marketing fluff. If I get to it from digital,
communications.
I'm sorry. As a developer, I know it is other, but you're right, it's an important communication message. And so this same project will have a different call to action depending upon whether it's a featured, if you got to it through the featured or through a digital category. So if and then I can go deeper into these. So these are all clickable, and if I go and click, so for the Ventus project customer, I had 4 projects, one of which was probably a print thing, right? So it's not going to be in digital, but it could be featured. But if I click on it, it's Wall Street Journal ad. I'll go to it, and I can go back and forth and check out the 6 slideshows. And if I click on its information, you'll see that that website for healthcare now takes the place in the list of related projects, because now I'm at the Wall Street Journal project as opposed to the healthcare project. So it's done automatically, but it's still the same marketing information at the bottom, and that's because I came from the featured, even though this is not necessarily a featured project. And then if I go back, I don't go back to where this project I mean, it could be in a completely different category. I'll go back to, when I hit the back button, I go back to the category that lists all the projects that I came from. In this case, it's the feature projects. So that's looking at the Ventus website project from the featured set of projects perspective. If I go to digital, I will see that same project. Now, along with all the digital projects, and I can get to it in the same way by just clicking on it. But you'll notice that I have a different call to action. That's because it came from the featured, and then it's different than the same project, which is what you're seeing here. That call to action was from the featured. So that last one was from the website. I'm sorry, digital, and this one is from the featured. So it really does give me the ability to show specific content with each project based upon a category that the project is being viewed from.
So the SOBI thing, not a Joomla module.
That's a SOBI thing, right? And so, even though the project could be in multiple categories, it's where I came to see it from. So that's sort of my entree into capturing the audience. If it's a digital audience, I'll have a different message as opposed to a print audience or a branding audience. So going back into the set of projects, one of the categories is a by client category. So I'm going to click on the by client, and I get all of these, and this is that other image. So these are all logos of my clients. If I page down to the bottom, you'll see the Ventus client. And if I click on the Ventus client, I will see a list of all the projects for that client, just like I saw a list of all the projects for digital or for print. This is all the list of projects for Ventus. So it's like a category. And if I click on the Ventus website project from this category, I go like I did all the others, to slideshows. But if I go back, hit the back button, I want to go back to where I came from. And this is a category that isn't a real category. So these are all projects for Ventus. They're like a category, but I never set up a category, and I'll show you this later on in the code in the back end. So there's no hard-coded category for Ventus, and so that's what I mean by dynamic categories. You put in the client name, and the category gets built for you dynamically. Also, that relationship of all the other liked named projects are related to each other. So those are two nice things that I liked about this implementation. So let's look a little bit about the code. The technology is using SOBIPro, and SOBIPro, if you're not familiar, uses XML. I never heard of XML. And so that, in all honesty, was a little bit of a conundrum for me. Did I want to learn a new technology? And so I went to the forums and I looked at the documentation, and I realized, XML is absolutely easy, but then they have this thing called XSL they use for templating. So it's extended style sheet language for templating. And you can think of it as basically PHP. So now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be traversing my XML document using XSLT as opposed to traversing my database or my PHP or my, well, I guess there's no, my DOM as the output of core using my PHP template.
So is the data stored in XML, or is it a flat XML file, or is it just a schema?
It's just a schema. Okay. So it's an intermediate. Well, it is the output of, as opposed to HTML, it's the output of SOBIPro. So what I'm doing is I'm going to traverse the XML document using XSLT, and I'm going to create HTML. And so this allows content to be manipulated using built-in and custom PHP functions in addition to that. So you can exit out of your template directly into PHP custom functions. So, it's a little bit apprehensive, but you'll see it's not that hard. So the way you look at the XML document is, you turn it on within SOBI, and then you put on a query parameter XML equals yes, and you get this, which is the source for the document, but it's still just source. And then if you view the source, Control U in your browser, you'll, instead of seeing the DOM, you'll see this. And so this is what XML looks like. It has the category that the entry lives in, so we're looking at one entry. This is coming from the featured category. It has all the entries, but each entry has its own hierarchy in this XML document. It has its name, so this is the Ventus entry, and it has its project description, or project name, I should say. So the project name is a field, so all the fields are listed: the project name, the project description, the client logo, which is an image field, the thumbnail, which is what you saw when I showed all the featured projects. Those are all the thumbnails of each of the projects. And then for each project, I have 6 slideshow entries, and I just call these fields image 1 through image 6. And like I said, I added a video field to that also. So you can see it's pretty simple. I mean, it's even simpler than the divs and what you see in a DOM, because it's it's all very spelled out.
Just the content.
So that's the content that you have to traverse with your XSLT. So if I look at it from the SOBIPro administrative backend, the content is arranged into sections and then categories. So the section is like an application, and I have all my projects in the TBDP section, and then I have those call to actions which use a different form in a different section. So that's why I used a different section, because I'm not going to have an image in this call to action piece of text. I'm just going to have a piece of text. And I'm not going to get into this, but this is, this is the staff with our pictures and the bios and stuff like that. So let's take the simplest one, and I'll show you what another form looks like in the back end, the call to action form. This fulfills the requirement to have the ability to add content to a project based upon the category the project is being viewed from. So the call to action, remember, is that piece of marketing information for each of the categories. And there it is, looking for a new creative partner, give us a call, and that's the requirement that it fulfills. So in a back end, if I, so this is the section. These are all the categories in the call to action section, and I just have one category as opposed to featured and digital and all that good stuff. I just have one. And if I look inside that category, I have items as opposed to projects. I have just pieces of text. And if I look inside any one of these, like for example the featured call to action, here's my form. So it's a simple form. Again, you've seen this before, this stuff on the right, but this is the stuff that I have control over, except for the categories. Every item lives in a category, and in this case it only lives in the one category. And I just have 2 fields, the name and the text that I want to display. Looking for a new creative partner, give us a call. And so this form is going to be matched against the project form, and it's going to display whenever a similarly named project category is displayed. So for all the featured projects that live in the featured category, I'm going to display this. So code-wise, we'll get into how I did that. And this is just telling you again that I'm going to be matching those names to these categories. Again, these are the categories in the TBDP section, and these are the names in the all actions section. So if I go to the code, if I go to the code, this is PHP code, and this is one of those custom functions that I wrote, and I'm simply looking for the name of the category that it came from, and I match it up with a simple select statement against the database. And by the way, the database is very user-friendly. If you don't know SQL, or if you know SQL just a little bit, there's plenty of well-written, well-documented help in the forums, and this is where this code came from, directly from the forum. So somebody already solved this problem and probably all the other queries you could think of. Again, the database is not too complex and it's easy to understand. And so what I'm doing here is I'm looking for a category name that's equal to the name, the field name, and I match it up and I find it and I spit out the HTML along with the action text, which is, you know, that marketing information. So that's sort of the code behind that piece. The next two pieces, ability to easily maintain a list of project attributes, and the project can reside in multiple categories. Well, that really doesn't involve any code, but you know, this is sort of how you do it. So you have the multiple categories, and then you have all these fields that you just put in information, you know, text or you choose the file, and you know, that's pretty easy. And so it's a form, and I like that, and it's, you know, it's nice and easy for somebody unfamiliar to maintain and without making any mistakes. Now, as far as automatically relating projects by client name, again, this is where it appears on a website. You know, if I put in a project and I called it, said the client name is called Ventus, all of a sudden it will pop up in this list, and that's what I call automatically without any tagging or doing anything. And this is sort of how I did it. So this is your first view of what XSL looks like. So compare this to PHP is the way I think of it. So this is my templating language, you know, XSL. So and it's intermixed like PHP with HTML. So there's my div, that's HTML, and then I'm declaring a variable, which is an XSL variable. And how do I get the value for that variable? Well, at this point in time, this is just a snippet, but I've done a certain degree of selection, so I'm in a category of some name, like featured, and I have an entry, and I look for the entry ID number. And so this is how I get information from my XML document, and using this, which is XSL. And then when I want to do if statements, I have to choose, you know, when and otherwise. And in this case, I'm looking for a certain value, and I'm calling a PHP function. So this is a call to a PHP function. I'll get into the structure a little bit more, but you know, you have a template for each section. So I have a section called TBDP, and this is where my template lives.
Is that inside the SOBIPro component?
Yes,
application?
Yes, and I'll show you exactly where it lives. But you know, this along with other XSL files are available to you. This one is for the entry. There are other ones for categories. There are other ones just like you know, different within COM content. This is a similar type of structure. So I'm going to be calling this PHP function that I created called getRelatedByClient, and Justin, this is the structure. I'll get into this in a second. So COM SOBIPro, and then user, and then templates, and then for each section, so I have a TB.
So if you create a section in SOBIPro, it'll spin off a new subdirectory?
Yes. Yep. And so the TBDP, and then you have your category, you have your common, And this is where I'm at right now. This is the functions that I've written for this section. And then you can see the other sections, the call to action and the people that I mentioned.
And Dennis, you totally up the ante. You are a developer now, man.
Well,
That's awesome.
I found this easier than PHP.
Yeah.
So I liked it, and I found it very useful. But, you know, getting back to PHP, here we go. So this is my function, my PHP function that I called from my XSL. And, you know, there's my select again. I got 90% of this code from the forum. There's lots of good stuff out there. And what I'm doing is I'm doing a where, but it's a union on itself where the client name in the database is equal to the client name from the entry that I'm on. Again, I'm coming up with the are we doing related? Yeah, we're doing. So I want to find all the other all the other projects have a similar client name. So I want the client names to be equal, but I don't want to, of course, spit out my own myself. So that's the not equal there. And then once I have the query all set to go, I spit out the set of rows along with the HTML in a for loop. And so, you know, they're just list items in an unordered list, and then I format them. So there's all my rows, there's my, for each PHP list.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Dennis, the XSLT style sheet is calling that PHP function, taking the data received from that database query and what's in the XML style sheet to build the...
Yeah, so this is the XSL, this is the call right here,
Okay.
and I'm passing it the information it needs. So it needs to know
Oh, okay.
from whence I came.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. 2 pieces of from whence I came. So that's the relation by project by client name. The last requirement, which I didn't realize I needed, was where I have, if you remember, all the logos of the clients, and I press on a logo, and then I go to all the projects for that client. So it's like all the projects for featured or all the projects for digital, but it's a dynamic category because I don't really have a category called, for example, Ventus. And so let me show you a little bit about what that looks like. So within my TBDP section, the by client category really has no entries. So no, you know, magic here. And I decided to use a module as opposed to using the regular SOBIPro structure here. And so what this gives you is, just like I showed you the templating area, well, the SOBIPro module has that same, it can have its same templating architecture and XSL capabilities. So I'm using a module, and I put it on the TBDP section. I'm going to use that as my template file. And so in the structure, it shows up under SOBIPro, under user, under templates. Only in this case, it shows up under front as opposed, you know, as like front end, and then you have your apps, your modules. So this is the hierarchy for finding this XSL templating file. And this is a little bit more XSL, so you know, you can see a little bit of the intermixing of the HTML. So this is, for example, where I'm putting out the logo, and if I click on a logo, it's in an anchor, so I have the image inside of an anchor, and I put it, I look for the data piece of my entry in my XML document, and I look for the image class, and I put that as my class that I'm going to use to style it. and similar thing for the actual title, and then for the actual source, the image itself, inside the image. So this will be a source equals inside the image tag. So, I mean, you know, this stuff really is not that bad. As opposed to PHP, I like it better. What am I showing you here? All right, so when I click from a logo to a project, which is now a dynamic project, and then I go into the project, I want to come back to the dynamic project and not to a real project. So I have to have some type of persistence. And so at first, this is what I did. I put it into a query string, and then now I updated it. I put it into a cookie. So that's how you do a query string. So that's dynamic categories, and you know how I coded that. That's about it. The PHP functions that I ended up using, I had one for get related by client, previous and next link, to get back sometimes when I needed persistence. I needed to use the query parameter, and again now I'm using cookies. Dynamic thumbnails, that's building the dynamic thumbnails when I went from the logo to the set of thumbnails, opposed to going to featured or digital to the thumbnails, which SOBIPro builds for me automatically. Dynamic previous and next links, create call to action, which I showed you, and then I had two small get and set cookie PHP functions. Other than that, I mean the design, we used isotope metaphysi, which is now coming out in a lot of the templates. It's where things move around to position all the spaces. And then I used CSS. We actually Bill coded this. He did the front end. CSS transitions throughout, so the menus, easing thumbnails. You'll see it if you go to the page. It's all very subtle. Nothing jumps out at you. It turns on very, very subtle. So transitions is what we use for that. Our boss likes it, we like it, so we like it, right? So, but I liked it because it gave me a great deal of flexibility. And some of these things you don't realize that you need or you want until you get into the middle of the project. And then you say, well, I can do it this way, but it's going to take this long. But, SOBIPro really is quite flexible when you get into, wanting to do some esoteric things. That's it. I have more code to show you if you want to delve into it. Other than that, any questions? Yes.
Have you done any more projects?
Have I?
SOBIPro after you did this?
I have not. So SOBIPro, I will use another project if I need to, but so far I haven't had a project as complex as this that needed SOBIPro. With that said, we have used other content construction kits. I've used Zoo, a very good one. Again, it didn't meet all the requirements for this project, and I also used Flexi Content.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not Flexi Content, K2.
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 Okay. Yeah.
So both Zoo and K2 I've used, and they definitely have a niche, and I've used them. I needed something a little bit more, in my mind, robust for some of the requirements that I had for this.
How is the support in SOBIPro for multilingual websites? I want to do a business directory that's both English and Spanish, and have the same sort of item associations that Joomla's native multilingual capabilities have. I don't know.
I do not know.
I noticed in the XML schema there was language tags throughout for a lot of it.
Okay. I don't have a requirement for it, so I got to believe, it's more popular in Europe than it is in the U.S.
Yeah, I would think.
So
that
I would think there's
they
something.
would be able to do a multilingual website.
Yeah.
Well, and then also I know that SOBIPro, and I've used SOBIPro in the past, but not its full suite of capabilities, not to the depth that you have. What's your impression of their additional plugins? They've got a reviews plugin, have a ready to go thing that drops into place. They've got a mapping field, I think, that they offer, radius search plug in? These are all things that I'm gonna need to try to
Yeah,
find.
they had quite a few. They had like 57 at the time that I looked. I would say I personally have experience with none of them, but I do know that they all, 90% of them, when I was looking, started their life in SOBI 2, which was like 10 years ago.
Right, right.
And so I got to believe, now that they're in SOBIPro, which is like another edition, not just professional. It really is a different architecture. I got to believe that they're robust and hardened.
Yeah. I need to build. I got a big potential project, and SOBI could be the answer. Also, so how much is this CCK going to cost me, Dennis? What do I got to pay for SOBI?
What did I say? It was $250. It's free. First of all, it's free.
Well,
but if you want support, then it was like $250, I think, for a year of support.
Because SOBI struck me as one of those extensions where, kind of, if you really want to do it, you really have to pay for the support. Like the free version doesn't come preloaded with a bunch of data that you got to clean up, and
No, I mean, well, it comes preloaded with demos, just like you have in Joomla. So yeah, so you would have to delete those. I actually believe there's like 2 or 3 demos, and then you can, if you get the Pro version, have 2 or 3 additional demos.
Yeah, I thought the Pro version, like one of the things you got with the Pro version was the vanilla install. It didn't have all the stuff like into it.
It's been so long I can't remember. I know I ended up with it, and I wanted it so that I could, still code.
See what was going on. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
When you do like a site like this you built it with the CCK, does that let you make your Joomla site like more streamlined, more efficient? Like when you built this site, does it have sort of just what you needed in it? Like some of the same types of things, like if I'm doing a site and I'm not a developer, right? I don't have like
well, that's what it.
So it's like I would accomplish some of those things by trying to add extensions or components.
Yes.
Like
so
someone needs fields, okay, a component sometimes.
Right.
So
then the site gets.
Well, for a CCK,
Yeah.
right. So for a CCK, you saw how I entered all the fields in the
Yeah.
back. So that's simplified, somebody maintaining those entries because
Right.
it's, one entry for one item. And with the ability to, use PHP in your templating and get at the model and not just a view, I think it's very flexible. So hope I answered your question. So
Yeah. Right.
So I think it's more flexible than Joomla, but if you don't need it, you don't need it.
Right.
So I don't know if you need it in all cases, but when you need if you need something that's very easy to maintain, you have a form in the administrative backend as opposed to just a WYSIWYG area, and it gives you the ability to, do automatic relationships like I have, what I showed you there. And now we have tagging, which is a step in the right direction, but still you have to put the tag in. So this would eliminate even that piece if you had simple relationships that you needed to join together.
Do the other CCKs let you do that for custom fields? I know you had.
They all have, they all have custom
They all
fields.
let you add custom fields to the articles.
Yes, that's
one thing
basically,
all let you do.
yeah, that's basically the definition of a content construction kit.
Okay.
So you have, in Joomla, you have an article and you have one field.
Right.
In content construction kits, you have content items and you have a bunch of content fields.
Okay, and you can create, okay, so
And you
that's
can-
the thing that's cross off.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much.